Hello, and welcome to the Authentically Elisa podcast, Unmasking Your True Self. I'm Elisa Bogarts, your guide on this journey to discovering the most genuine version of yourself. Each episode is a step towards unveiling the incredible power that lies within you as we strip away all the shoulds and shine a light on the coulds. Together, we'll explore the path of self-empowerment, self-confidence, and the courage to be unapologetically you. Thank you for being here. Welcome to today's episode. Today, we are going to be talking about releasing self-judgment and what people don't know about grief. And today I have an amazing guest with me who's actually a grief coach, and her name is Maria Belanic. Maria Belanic is a bereaved mom, coach, and speaker on grief and self-compassion. After the devastating loss of her son, she transformed her pain into a mission and became a certified grief educator by David Kessler. Maria created a unique program to help others let go of self-judgment, to find inner peace in feeling heard and acknowledged. Welcome, Maria. So glad to have you here.
Well, thank you, Elisa. I'm so glad to be here with you. You're such an amazing host, and I know that you've done such wonderful things, and this is definitely a joy and an honor to be on your show.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so happy to have you here as well. So tell me about, like how you, well, I mean, we just kind of talked about sort of how you got into this field of work, but why you sort of decided to transform your pain and make this mission and become this grief educator and just why you're so passionate about it.
Yeah, thanks, Elisa. And it's a good question, and it's that origin story of where I was going through so much pain, and for 10 years,
Wow.
I lost part of my life, like 10 years. I do not remember what my life was like. It was a blur. This is after my son passed away. I was in, of course, deep pain.
Mhm.
And I was also feeling like guilty uh, with those regrets. And I was regretting things that had happened in my son's childhood. One of them being not taking them to Disneyland.
Mm.
Uh, or, in questioning myself, was I a good mom? All these things that came along. And also because people were telling me, oh, you're so feeling stuck, or why are you so stuck? Why aren't you over it? I felt that I was becoming more isolated and more lonely, and it became this cycle. And all of the things, even in my own childhood, I was starting to question, like what kind of a person was I, my self-identity. Now, my son had passed away from cancer, he had cancer for 11 years. And yet I was kind of like, why couldn't I find a cure? All these
Mm.
kind of things that I thought I should have been this superwoman, super mom, super, I don't know what the heck, what, but almost like I should have, and there's the word should, that I should have had all the answers. And I felt defeated because I didn't.
Mm.
And we go through life with the coulda, woulda, shouldas. And we kind of question and sort of not even trust our own selves. And that was so sad. And I had done that for 10 years. I'm sure I'd done that beforehand.
Mm.
However, I hadn't noticed it until this, this one time, not one time, but during those decade, because I was living sort of like a robotic life. I was numb, wasn't fully present. Um, it's kind of like the whole thing's a blur. I don't even know it's kind of like going to sleep and waking up, and the world has changed. And I
Right.
don't even know where I was.
Wow. That's a long time to be living in that.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it kind of makes sense is why you really want to help people to let go of the self-judgment and have that inner peace, because it seems like you were just in this place of self-judgment for so long and didn't have inner peace because you were just in this blurred, numbed world.
Yes. And that's what I've realized. It's not only just myself that has gone through, and the more that I speak to other women who have struggled with the loss of a child, there are women out there that have been kept silent for 20, 30, 40 years, even 50 years.
Oh.
I know one woman who has said that she's been following me has actually said that is what has given her the courage to speak and to share her own story, to actually start sharing. And that releases a burden that we have within our bodies.
Mm.
I think the shift needs to happen in regards to how we view trauma, how we view someone sharing their stories, how we view someone who is sharing the story of a person that has passed away, their existence, the impact that they made on their lives and to the world.
Mm. Yeah, and I
And
love that you were the outlet for that woman.
mhm.
It's okay for me to share that now and have that release and talk about it, no longer be silenced.
And that is so true. And I think a lot of times we have been taught to keep anything that, what the world thinks as terrible or horrible, silent.
Mm.
And what it does is that we keep it within our own bodies without a release, and it does more harm. Even in those 10 years, I do remember I had more health issues than I've ever had before.
Yeah, it just wreaks havoc on your body for sure. Ugh. And so when you kind of came like out of that after the 10 years and you really started to, make this transformation for yourself and really transform that pain into a mission, what like in terms of yourself and like how did you sort of find your authenticity? Like how did you kind of bring that back? What did kind of because I feel like you're probably such a different person, right? Like 10 years had passed and you're still a bereaved mom and but you wanted to turn it around. So, yeah, what did it sort of being your authentic self mean to you then?
And you're right, it definitely did change. My authenticity, what I kind of felt was I'm not going to hide that I'm grieving. I'm not going to hide that I'm a bereaved mom. And that's one of the reasons I say a disruptor or unapologetically is because this is something that's happened. And I feel that, and I believe that grief stays with us, that it's not going to go anywhere. It evolves with me. And because of my experience, I'm quite open and I find myself sharing the vulnerabilities.
Mhm.
Because one of the things, I mean, I was told beforehand, oh, you're so strong, you're so strong. This is when my son was dying. And I find that I dislike the words strong when they're supposed to be towards a person. When we say, oh, you're so strong, you have strength. Well, actually, it takes courage even sometimes to get out of bed.
Yeah.
And at times, I kind of feel it's a resilience that we have. It's the courage that we have to move forward. So it's not about strength and it's not about being strong, because at times we don't have a choice. There is no choice except to move forward or to remain in that numbness. And those are the only two choices that I saw. And so I kind of figured, I could stay numb, hiding behind this mask, pretending that everything is fine, and inside feeling numb, robotic, and just empty. Or I had the choice to move forward, and moving forward meant my grief was coming with me and I wasn't going to hide it.
Yes, and I think that's like the missing piece there is knowing that it's gonna stay with you and maybe it won't be as strong in your mind, right? Like maybe it won't sort of like take over, but it will always be with you. You will always have that experience and that loss. And and the beauty is that you can move forward with it.
hmm And that's what I kind of say is that moving forward means that you can enjoy life. You can still do things that bring creativity enjoyment, fulfillment, and you can still be sad. You can have moments of anger, frustration, all of these emotions, because I believe we emotions coexist. Like two emotions can coexist at the same time. And the reason I say grief or bereaved, we miss the presence of that person. We miss what could have been.
Yeah.
We miss the future of who they could have been or our future with them. However, life does change. I mean, it changes anyways, whether we want to or not. And it's about saying the pain may remain the same. I become bigger than the pain. Because a lot of times we're taught that, oh, the pain's going to get smaller. And when we're waiting for something like that, I think that gives us a false hope.
Mm.
We're waiting for something that we think it's going to be external
Yeah.
rather than internal, where I'm acknowledging and being aware of my pain and saying, you know what, I can be bigger than my pain. My life is bigger than my pain.
Yeah, I love that. And love that there's sort of like this, like when you were talking about that, I was thinking about sort of having this like light at the end of the tunnel, because when you're in it, like I remember I was 18 when my dad died, and I remember the next day we went out for lunch. And I remember just sitting there in this restaurant, and life was happening, of course, right? Like people were working and driving around, and like everybody was just doing their normal day. But to me, the day was so different. And I remember just being like, oh, like I guess, like I felt like, I don't know, as if I was sort of standing still and the world was kind of like buzzing around me, and it was so big. It kind of consumed my whole thing. And I was just like, how can everybody just be doing their normal thing? Like this doesn't make sense to me because my life is so different. But of course, that was just individual to me and what I was going through. And when you're in that, and in that moment, especially like so soon after, it can be hard to think that you will grow bigger of it, and it will, seem smaller because you've moved forward. And I think that that's just a lovely message that life will go on, you will move forward, you will grow, and it will remain with you.
And thank you so much for sharing about your dad and your experience. Because one of the things that I really believe is that to honor our own selves and our souls, and to honor the person that who we love, who is no longer here, is to say stories about them, like to share the stories of how they impacted our lives. And that's the aspect also about being our authentic self, is that in society, it's almost like once they no longer exist because they've passed away, it's like no one wants to say their names. No one wants to share stories about them. And to me, I feel like, no, we have it wrong. Their stories should still be shared. Like we should, to be willing enough to say, hey, this is what my dad did in my life, or this is the things that we did together, or just so that way, I think it brings that closeness and they stay within our hearts.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where they should belong. And they should be looked at, yeah, with like fondness and kindness and happy memories. And that love always remains there.
Hmm.
I know that you believe that words are very important. And so like how can we sort of change our language and the words that we're using, um, to help us get unstuck if someone is in that place and they want to move forward and grow bigger?
And you're right, words are so powerful in how we speak them and how they land for us. And that's one of the aspects is I feel people will choose words that resonate with them. One of the things that I know that I like to do is that when I'm having someone and I know that they've experienced a loss, to check in with them and And especially, we use such a common line. How are you feeling? How you doing? Which is so broad.
Yeah.
So I add, how are you doing today? Or how are you feeling right now? To be present in that moment. And there are words that um, will resonate more to someone, and some words will activate someone else. And
Mm.
sometimes none of us are going to know what word will be activating. It could be just as simple as saying the word blue, right? For someone, that may be an activating word, and for someone else, it's not. So the person's going to have to choose what are the right words for them and how does it land for them. I know it's one of these things that it's sort of like, well, I wish it was so easy that we could have this, this, and this, uh, or a snap of a finger. I know one of the things that annoys me is when people still say, "Oh, there's 5 stages of grief. What stage are you in?" And it's okay to sort of say, the seasons or whatever works for someone. However, I like to educate people on saying there really is no stages. It's not a box that we can tick off and go, okay, I'm out of denial now. Let me tick that one. And what's the other box that I need to go through or stepping? And one of the aspects, like even with when people go denial, I look at it and it's something that goes, the person who has experienced loss is not in denial. Sometimes I think there's a disconnect between our brain and our hearts in the sense of, I remember that first year when my son died. Every time I heard a car or a door, it was like, am I waking up from this nightmare?
Hmm.
I'm just going to turn around and he's going to be walking through that door and I've just had a bad dream. And that first year feels very dreamlike. Well, okay, maybe not it's not a good dream. It's like you're in a
Right.
nightmare.
Yeah.
And you want someone to sort of wake you up and go, no, you've just had a really bad dream. That is not reality. Because the reality is, every time you wake up, you're reliving what has already happened. And part of releasing is knowing that someone has passed away. It's just connecting our heart and our brains together. And sometimes our brains are protecting us because it's just too overwhelming all at the same time. And yet the person knows exactly who passed away.
Right. Yeah, because we can sort of disassociate and live in that numbness and not connect to the feelings.
Hmm.
That can be an easy thing to fall into, disassociation.
It really is. I mean, I always look at it. I mean, and I'll be the first one to say I'm the first biggest chicken. I mean, I don't like pain. None of us really do.
Right.
And of course, we want to avoid it at all costs. I mean, I haven't met anyone that will say, yes, the pain is great, unless maybe you're a bodybuilder and then they're already taught, no pain, no gain. Um, but in reality, none of us want to have a life full of pain. We're all, and this in this pursuit of happiness, which again, I feel is a falsehood. It leads us down to the wrong, I'm going to say path, just for lack of a better word, because we've been taught that we only want to see what happy images are. And I look at it, even without grief, we have a whole range of emotions that we go through.
Yep.
Happiness is fleeting. Now, and we can be joyful because joyful is within us, and happiness sort of looks like it's an external. Um, we're looking for this external results or external, looking for that word that
Gratification.
yeah, sort of that validates us.
Hmm.
And in actual fact, sometimes I believe that everything that we have comes from within us. Yes, we can look for support, that's external. We can have tools and tips to guide us. In the end, it still comes down to what is your intuition saying? What are your whispers of the heart saying to you? Because each of us will know what is right for our own selves. It's a matter of getting connected and being able to be still to listen to the whispers. Because the self doubts and all of that, um, they're actually quite loud.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to say because I did, I allowed them to take over. And so that seems to be like shouting at us. And yet the whispers of intuition, of telling us what is right for us, is very silent. Like they're a low whisper. And that's why the stillness is so important. Like walking in nature, being
Mhm.
grounded, all these sort of things to say um, that connect us back towards our inner selves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And also, like we were talking about emotions earlier, to just a reminder to everyone that, emotions, they come and go. All of them are impermanent, and it's kind of like the waves, like on a shore. And so, um, so when we even like, yeah, good and bad ones, just like you were saying, right? Happiness and joy, but also sadness and grief. And so, yeah, just knowing that they do come and go. And so, how can you talk to us about, and like for the listeners, how they can be their authentic selves now, living with the grief? I know we kind of touched on that a little bit with how you sort of did it. But yeah, do you have
Hmm.
any sort of like tips on that of how someone can live their authentic self now, living with the grief?
Oh, definitely. And I know I have a guide that gives more tools and some tips that help a person to navigate what they're going through or what they're in. And it really is. It's about doing like the grounding and being aware. Because a lot of times I believe we shut out our emotions, we shut out our thoughts. And emotions on their own and thoughts on their own are neither right or wrong. They're just thoughts. It's what meaning do we put behind it,
Right.
right? Because I mean, if I were to say an apple, well, it's just a word until we look at an apple and we're like, oh, yeah, that's an apple. But that's an apple in English. And in another language, it's called something different. And that's the same thing in grief, is that we can name our emotions, and emotions are neither right or wrong. It's just a feeling that we have. And feelings are neither right or wrong. And when we acknowledge that and we can say, yes, I'm feeling angry. I am feeling sad. I'm feeling frustrated. Once we say it out loud, it actually releases it from our body rather than when we want to hide it. Now, I'm not saying to be out there and to being quite over the top in your anger where you're harming someone. I'm just talking about regular anger and the frustration. And it goes to the point of once we acknowledge it and we become aware of it, it releases something in our bodies. And in that release, all of a sudden something happens like altogether. So I believe that all our emotions, we're all sort of, it becomes our thoughts, it's in our bodies, it's the whole like mind, body, soul connection because everything's interconnected.
Hmm.
And by doing one aspect, it helps the other aspects. So, because we're not focusing just on one aspect. So, we're not just focusing on the emotions. Whatever we're releasing encompasses all.
how can we relate that to people living their authentic self?
Well, at times, so one of the tips that I always say is journaling. So journaling is really good in the sense of you write free form, and free form means no thinking. You just take up. So I mean, I love use. I always say to people, rather than on a computer, write on a pad, like, paper and pen,
Yeah.
paper and pencil. Just write whatever's in your thoughts, whatever is your feelings. You just put it all down and don't read it. You are just writing. You're sort of emptying yourself of what is out there, and you just write, write, write. And then in a day or two, go back and read it. And that gives you an insight of what you're feeling. It gives you an insight of what your thoughts are. And when we do this, we do it in a non-judgmental way because it's not about judging our emotions. So whatever you're feeling, just acknowledge it and be aware of it. And that's it. And then treat yourself with kindness. Because a lot of times when we're feeling something, we say to ourselves, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this. Oh, what a terrible person I am. No, this would be like treat your journal like your best friend. Someone is sharing something with you. Would you turn around and go and tell your best friend, wow, you're a terrible person. Why'd you do that? No, you'd go and say, oh, right, yeah. You've gone through a lot of hardness. That's tough. So you show yourself that own compassion. And that's why I believe compassion is so important. Like we need to be vulnerable to our own selves in a non-judgmental way and then give ourselves back compassion. Because there's that saying that whenever we empty something, we have to fill it up with something else, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to empty out of something and then it just comes back twofold. You basically want to empty yourself out and then fill yourself back up with compassion and kindness. And that compassion and kindness leads to self-love. I mean, we hear so much about self-love. I mean, here's another word, but really it's giving yourself kindness. It's giving yourself compassion. And it's just acknowledging where you're at. And then and when I say acceptance, acceptance just means you're aware of where you are and you're acknowledging where you are. And again, there's no right or wrong because we make ourselves right or wrong for a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
We could be walking down the street and all of a sudden we're making ourselves wrong for wearing the wrong shoes or whatever. And so I I think the world seems to, or society seems to run on negativity rather than just sort of accepting like, this is who I am right now. And I think that's the part that we forget is that we're constantly evolving. And even in grief, as a bereaved mom, I'm constantly evolving also. And I just have to look at where am I right now? Who am I being right now? Because tomorrow I'll probably be someone else. I mean, it's still me. However, the day has changed.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll be sad and maybe I'll be joyful.
Yeah. Just accepting as we are. Yeah. And even doing that, doing the journaling and then accepting that, like, oh, that's how I was feeling yesterday. And it kind of gives you, yeah, perspective and acceptance of it.
Mhm.
The sort of recap of what we talked about today is that with grief, that it stays with us and that we will grow and become bigger and move forward. And it will always stay with us and it will always be there, but we will get bigger. And to really, as you're doing that growth and moving forward, to choose your words wisely and really fill yourself with compassion and kindness, especially in those times where maybe you're releasing, sort of negative emotions or whatever's happening in your life, especially if you do it with journaling, and that as you release all that, fill it back up with compassion and kindness. So Maria, where can our listeners find you online?
Yes, they can find me online at mariabelanic.com. And I do have a gift for your audience. It's about letting go of the woulda, coulda, shouldas, right?
Nice.
And I know that your audience is definitely inspired, and that's why you have the name Inspiration by Elisa, because I know that is your purpose by inspiring other people. And so my aim is to inspire your audience to, of course, be kind to themselves, show themselves compassion, and of course to others too, but mostly to themselves. And if they know someone who is grieving, to definitely pass the guide along, or my name. And even if you're a non-griever, the guide is still going to help. Because I remember, even from before my son passed away, I was an insecure person. In hindsight, you kind of look back and I'm thinking, yeah, we could all use releasing the coulda, woulda, shouldas.
For sure. There's so much of that. And I hear myself using that word should. I'm like, oh, I wish I didn't use that word just now. It's
I
just such
know.
a part of our normal language. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, and that's
Interesting.
one of the things about you know, doing our best in eliminating that we should do this, or definitely.
Well, thank you. Perfect. So do you have any final words of wisdom to finish us off?
Yes, realistically, just to acknowledge where you are. I feel that that is so important. Uh, just accepting yourself right where you are right now. There's nothing broken because you're not broken and you don't need to be fixed. It's about saying you're right, like who you are right now. That's who you are. And it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Your beautiful, imperfect being is wonderful. And let that person be and accept and love that person.
Hmm.
I love that. Thank you so much for being here. I think this is really um, a subject that I think, not a lot of people talk about. So I'm so glad we talked about it today and how it's really like moving forward with it, and what you can do with this experience that you've had in your life. And so I just think it was so incredibly helpful. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I am definitely so honored.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope it inspired you to live a more authentic life. I'd love your help in inspiring more people to live authentically. So please follow, rate, and leave a review so we can create a ripple effect of authenticity. Until next time, stay true to you, be bold, and thrive on your own terms. This is Elisa, signing off authentically.